Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
What conspiracy theory is plausible enough to be true? 1. Super obsessed with conspiracy theories. However, most of them are so bizarre I wouldn't even consider most of them possible. Then there's a handful that's possible, but I feel most arguments for it are from people that already made up their mind it's a cover-up or a conspiracy rather than sincerely making effort to understand what's the most likely possibility. With that said, Kennedy's death is a remarkably interesting one. It's the one thing where the more you dig, the more you realize that whatever the truth is, it's definitely covered up. There is more evidence, excluding speculations, facts, which supports against the official assessment than for it. It could have been the CIA director, Allen Dulles, ego throwing a power tantrum. It could be a misfire that killed him from a nearby guard that actually killed him, and though the shot is completely possible to 100% be from Oswald, it's such a wild shot a reasonable default would be to doubt it. The driver didn't take him to the hospital right away, the parade was sort of out of nowhere planned, and the list goes on. Because of Kennedy's overly optimistic nature, no foreign enemy of the US would have wanted to kill him since he wanted to work with everyone rather than continue Cold War practices, even going as far as planning to provide ICBM technology to the Soviets in order to help reach space together rather than having a space race, which many including Allen Dulles strongly disagreed with since it helped them develop a missile-based nuclear weapon. Regardless of what the truth is, I absolutely believe there's a cover-up. In case it's not specific enough, I absolutely believe the Titanic ship was swapped. Why wouldn't you from a business standpoint? Even morally speaking, insurance companies, it's the sensible thing to do, and ethics is not of discussion ammo if it's not the little guys being hurt from it. Then there's stuff that kind of doesn't count because it's so normal to believe it and people often forget their technical conspiracy theory. For example, I do believe the CIA has robot bugs. So many people have said so at this point, and honestly even civilians are not far off from doing it, and they don't even have the intellectual or financial support to do it. Also, yes, I definitely think Trump was a Russian conspirator, and no, it wasn't proven yet and evidence doesn't change that, so it absolutely is a conspiracy theory, but a very reasonable one to believe it will probably learn as fact within 4 years. 2. Cars. Been to Japan and other countries that actually have great public transit. Not quite sure why it has to be so abysmal in America. Nobody even cares. I'm positive big businesses will do anything it takes to snuff out new public transit ideas to keep the vast majority of people needing cars just for basic needs. For instance, if I don't live in a massive city, why is everything commercial so far away that I need a car to get there? There was also something I read ages ago about the Rockefellers buying some public transit and then torching it because of their business interests, but I'm not keen on locating the source at this moment. 3. Aliens just live in 4D/higher dimensions. If you watch a video of how a 4D ball rolls around in our 3D perception, YouTube, you might draw a comparison to the way flying saucers look flying around. There are aspects of higher dimensions that we literally cannot understand, and interaction with higher dimensional beings would be exactly like you're watching 2D cartoons, except the cartoon characters suddenly become sentient and you are capable of seeing and conversing with them. You would look like a weird, morphing flat plane to the cartoon characters, and they would look like normal 2D characters because we do live in 3D. Now, imagine you are the cartoon characters, or rather we are. Here is the best depiction of 4D objects moving through a 3D space would look like. That's what the asterisk observers would look like to us, but possibly fleshy or metallic, both being just as scary. 4. The Montreal Screwjob was a work. Everyone came out on top after it, in one way or another having gained something that was in their favor. Brett looked like a hero that was betrayed in his own home country, leaving to make even more money in another company. Vince solidified himself as a two-faced businessperson planting the seeds of the Mr. McMahon persona, and Sean have been portraying on TV, now as world champion drawing serious heat. The fact that things happened to be filmed behind the scenes for a documentary that was being made independently by the WWF to prove the point seemed too convenient. The camera and mics were live exactly when they needed to be, and just out of range when it added more drama. Brett wearing a wire in secret discussing the finish for the match, where he and Vince could both perfectly be heard. Then on top of that, Vince getting one shot in a mostly closed-off locker room, away from the cameras. Except for Vince's cronies and Brett family. Only to have a camera waiting outside the room to catch Vince staggering out after getting dropped. Also, the WWF camera crew allowing to show Brett mime out the initials WCW right after screwing him is another thing that makes no sense. When he's leaving the company, the belt is off of him, and now the heat is all on Shawn. The whole thing was suspect. 5. The Lost Cosmonauts. It's not your typical tinfoil hat stuff. This theory has just enough intrigue and historical context to make you wonder, what if? The theory suggests that during the height of the space race, the Soviet Union may have sent cosmonauts into space before Yuri Gagarin, the officially recognized first human in space. But, these missions supposedly ended in tragedy, with the cosmonauts either dying in space or upon re-entry, and the Soviet Union covered it up to avoid public embarrassment. Cold War secrecy, the space race was as much about propaganda as it was about scientific achievement. Both the USSR and the USA were playing high-stakes poker with space exploration. Secrecy and disinformation were part of the game. Missing cosmonauts, there are accounts, albeit unverified, of radio transmissions intercepted by amateur radio operators. These transmissions hinted at unsuccessful missions and even stranded cosmonauts. Soviet space triumphs and tragedies. We know about the USSR's secretive nature and their tendency to only publicize successes. The catastrophic failure of the N-1 moon rocket was kept secret for years. Could the same have happened with early human space flights? But no concrete evidence. Here's the catch, there's no definitive proof. It's all based on hearsay, circumstantial evidence, and a few eerie recordings. The Soviet archives haven't coughed up any smoking guns, yet. So, is it possible that there were lost cosmonauts, victims of the space race, who orbited the Earth in silence and despair? The plausibility lies in the context of the times, a high-pressure race to space, cloaked in secrecy and national pride. It's a theory that, while unconfirmed, isn't entirely outlandish given the era's nature. 6. That some of the pyramids/temples and the Sphinx of ancient Egypt predate the dynastic Egyptian people/kings we attribute them to. There is quite a substantial amount of evidence to show that rain weathering on the Sphinx could only mean that it's at least around 12,000 years old, when that region was wetter, much older than it is claimed to be. But this doesn't fit the narrative regarding the rise of human civilizations out of the Stone Age, so it's immediately dismissed. Also, you will find huge, intricately carved statues from some of the hardest stones around, granite etc., yet the hieroglyphs that sometimes adorn them are crudely scratched on in odd positions. It's almost as if these dynastic rulers were in possession of them and wanted to attribute this work as their own. It's sometimes so obvious to the point of embarrassing how bad it looks. No, it wasn't aliens. The argument is that an earlier, as yet unknown civilization in ancient Egypt created many of the great works we see today, and after some proposed societal collapse, these were later reclaimed by the ancient Egyptians we know, further down the line of history. We even have evidence of a cataclysm around 12,000 years ago known as the Younger Dryas, where something caused temperatures to suddenly drop and killed off lots of megafauna, and likely advanced civilizations with it too. The primary metals that ancient Egyptians worked with were bronze, and bronze is simply not hard enough to achieve the carvings that we see. Even with today's tools, it would be incredibly difficult to pull off some of these pieces, from statues to precision-cut granite pots. And there weren't just a few of these pieces, there are tens of thousands of them that still exist in pristine condition today, indicating the technology, material, and knowledge in order to create these items with ease. 7. The vast majority of conspiracy theories are created by the government and megacorporations and other big wealthy interests to distract from actual horror. The QAnon conspiracy nonsense about Oprah and Tom Hanks and Biden being sent to Guantanamo Bay right as all these powerful people, including heads of state, got linked to Epstein is just too convenient. All the alien stuff in the 50s served to distract us from our spy plane construction. 9/11 conspiracies distracted from the fact the building was poorly built with way less rebar than it should have had but was passed anyway by mobbed-up inspectors for decades. JFK conspiracies are rooted in making you sound like goofball when you talk about the very real history of assassination by the CIA of leftist leaders. If you hear a conspiracy theory, it's because someone powerful is trying to distract you from and make you sound insane when you bring up the real horror happening in the world. 8. I didn't believe in conspiracies until I started studying food. There is a constant and consistent effort by the major authorities, and they are not necessarily aligned or unified in some mass evil plot to keep people in a state of dependence. Corporate AG and their associated lobby groups profit most by stifling competition and creating customers. That is to say, stop most people from growing their own food, and if they do, make sure they are buying that seed stock from you. Since it's cheaper and easier to mass-produce fewer more durable products, you get monocultures. Like the busted medical system, when symptoms start to crop up from the lack of diversity, gradual loss of heirloom and heritage varieties, the sad state of nutrient density, or the negative health impacts of modified monoculture diets, soil depletion, etc., they've basically got a new solution for that problem: more products. Big Pharma and, at least here in the US, most insurance-based medical practices get huge benefits here too, so they don't bother teaching nutrition in med schools as a required study. It's a messed up cycle of abuse, but only the hippies and homesteaders think it's an issue. 9. 100% convinced the mafia was behind JFK's assassination. They had significant ties to Cuba, and after JFK's failed overthrow of Castro, the island remained shut down. The mafia had heavily invested in casinos there, among other things, to create a new Las Vegas. With the island shut down, it greatly affected the mafia's bottom line. Also, the story of Jack Ruby being involved is what really freaks me out. He was a loyal mafia member who had cancer, so in a sense nothing to lose, in tying up the loose end of Oswald. He says he was upset at JFK's assassination, but recently released documents uncovered he made comments about watching the fireworks on the day JFK was shot. He was also in close proximity to where the event happened. 10. The New York Giants were absolutely stealing signals, or intercepting radio, when they beat the Vikings 41-0 in the 2000 NFC Championship. There is no way in hell that a team with Culpepper, Moss, Robert Smith, gets completely and utterly shut down at every turn. Almost every play in that game looked like a Tecmo Super Bowl play where you pick the other team's play correctly and blitz so hard they can't even get a pass off. No one will ever convince me that there wasn't some kind of malfeasance in that game. 11. That the US government abandoned some 100 POWs in Vietnam and covered it up. Coming from an autobiography of a special ops soldier who claimed he was a part of the planned rescue mission. Supposedly, Nixon was negotiating their release and the end of the war at the same time. The Vietnamese wanted to hold on to them so the Americans wouldn't just attack them after the ceasefire. Nixon wanted the war to end ASAP, so he agreed and planned to negotiate for them later. Then Watergate happened and everyone got sacked. The replacements never knew about this deal, and Vietnam never brought it up. Years later, the military uncovered it. They started training as a team. A few days before the rescue, a retired CIA agent announced it to the Word and said he'd personally go in and recover them. The mission was scrapped. This happened a second time a year later, in which the retired agent did actually go in and got a lot of his own private soldiers killed. The CIA then reported mass executions after that event. Eventually, some of the soldiers launched a lawsuit at the gov they lost. John McCain, John Kerry, and Bob Smith led the investigation and were rumored to have covered up evidence, though this part is largely a rumor more than anything else. 12. That the tobacco industry has driven the vape bans, aka flavor bans, across the country by promising more money to the state. There's this misconception that big vape is the same as big tobacco, and a lot of that has to do with Juul, who was owned by Altria. Juul didn't even start out as Altria, but they eventually bought it. When Juul wasn't owned by Altria, they had tamer ads, and while they were the choice of teens, they weren't explicitly targeted. Once Altria bought Juul, some funky stuff went down. Juul ads began having more colorful and cartoonish ads, or what most people would classify as ads appealing to children. Every tobacco company has to do anti-smoking initiatives by law, and when Altria bought Juul, there were reports of reps doing those anti-smoking talks to teens, then advertising Juul when teachers looked away. The truth is owned by the tobacco companies. Has anyone noticed a difference between their old smoking ads and current vaping ads? Their old smoking ads were obnoxious aft, which is actually a tactic they've used for a while. By making their anti-smoking PSA obnoxious, fewer people would take them seriously, causing less of a dent in their cigarette sales. Notice how most of the Truth's anti-vape ads aren't obnoxious? Best part is, long after Altria bought Juul, Juul was in a California court, and their attorney literally said, "Your Honor, can't you see that this is all a tactic by Big Tobacco to stop vaping to get their customers back? Juul is Big Tobacco." I can't help but feel they did that to make those of us seeing this sound crazy. In reality, many adult vapers actually use since many states have made it so only pods are sellable, refillable tanks instead of pods. Most vapes you find in gas stations and pods found around are owned by tobacco companies, and there's a massive quality difference. Using a gas station vape or a pod feels no different to me than smoking, and I got respiratory infections like I did when smoking with them. On the other hand, most refillable liquids were made by small businesses and many of those have zero interaction with tobacco. A lot of those get their nicotine from tomatoes and tea, not tobacco. So, Big Tobacco saw zero from small vape businesses. There's also a huge quality difference, in that I can feel my lungs healing from my years smoking with the small business, refillable juice, while the tobacco-owned pods make me feel like I'm reopening smoking wounds. The thing about the flavor ban is a lot of us actually don't really care about flavors. Like, yes, my coffee cheesecake is a nice bonus, but what I care more about is being able to breathe. Only the refillable do that for me. However, if there's no flavors, how can a business stay around? I mean, all they'd sell is tobacco flavor, and that's not enough to keep a small business open. That's what's so ironic about the flavor bans. Everyone says it's to hurt Big Tobacco, but in reality it's just given them a monopoly again. Only Big Tobacco can afford to only sell tobacco-flavored products. The small businesses we should be helping fight Big Tobacco have been closing down because they can't compete with Big Tobacco anymore, thanks to these laws. Then, a lot of areas that ban flavors are seeing teens smoke traditional cigarettes again. Real smoking amongst teens was non-existent. Many people point to the teen smoking rate going up around 2017, while the reason it appears to have gone up is because our smoking and vaping statistics were rolled into one. In reality, the same number of teens have used nicotine products for a while now, they just stopped smoking. But now that vaping is going away, because a flavor ban does effectively ban vaping, they're smoking again. It astounds me the UK is pushing vaping as harm reduction alternative to smoking based on their own government-funded studies, yet our US FDA and CDC are trusting tobacco-funded studies that say vaping is equal or more harmful than smoking. Then what do the states get from this? More money. Vaping hadn't fallen under the traditional tobacco taxes, and they didn't give money for the Mazars Settlement Agreement, MSA. What the MSA did was give states a certain amount of money for each pack of cigarettes sold. 50 cents per pack was the highest some states got, and if you look at the timelines, the states that got that much were the first to enact flavor bans, while states that got less dragged their feet. This all sucks, because I try to tell anyone anything positive about vape flavors, they think all I care about is a quick buzz. No, what I care about is having a safer alternative to improve my health. Smoking did a number on me, but I've actually gotten healthier after starting vaping. And thanks to refillable tanks, I've been able to titrate my nicotine to now where I've got 0.5 milligrams of nicotine per ml and will be able to stop altogether in a month. That's not something you can do with traditional cigarettes or pods. Then people will tell me propaganda that is easily verifiably false from evidence-based studies or my own experience. I mean, I've actually told doctor that with the flavor bans, if all I can get are pods, a part of me feels like smoking again since it won't make a difference, and it's hilarious to see them go from, vaping is worse than smoking, to, wait. No, smoking's so much worse, you shouldn't switch back. Most of all, what I don't understand is, smoking and vaping is 21 in the US now, like alcohol. Why does alcohol get to have flavors, but when vapes do it's considered too appealing to kids? How is flavored alcohol also not too appealing to kids? If 21 is good enough to allow alcohol flavors, why isn't it for vaping? The fight against flavor bans isn't about some fleeting pleasure, it's about being able to make more choices with our health. But then it takes away money from states and big tobacco. 13. This is a super niche one, but I believe Jean Calment was a fraud. She did not live to 122. Jean Calment had a daughter, Yvonne, who apparently died at age 36. She later moved in with the daughter's husband and helped raise her grandchild. Or did she? Maybe the mother is the one who died, and the daughter took up her name. When she became more well-known in her later years, most people who saw her claimed she looked decades younger than her age. There are 10 people who have lived more than 117 years, and 9 of them never made it to 120. Yet here is this one crazy outlier that outlived all the rest by 2 years? I literally don't believe it. When these theories have been raised, a straightforward way to prove them wrong has been suggested: a quick dig, a small DNA sample, and compare the DNA against the known relatives from Yvonne's father's side of the family. If it's Jean, then there will be far less of a match, they were distant cousins. If it's Yvonne, there will be a strong match. The family refused to check. 14. I worked with an extreme conspiracy nut. Me and my crew leader at the time were joking about how crazy our coworker was. I then asked him, "Hey man, are there any conspiracy theories you believe?" He said, "I have one I came up with. Basically, the town he lived in is right next to mine. The town he lived in also was always having roads blocked off for construction. Like every day there is a road blocked off somewhere, and it's a pretty small town to be doing all that work all the time. Also, the roads over there are downright terrible. Looks like Lightning McQueen paved their roads." So, he believes that what is actually happening is the city bought a bunch of those big traffic cones in bulk. He also believes they don't have anywhere to store all the traffic cones. So, to deal with the situation they would block off roads and pretend to fix them, so they don't have to worry about it. It is probably my favorite one. That one in the art industry is just a sham tied to tax breaks. Theories are definitely the best to me. 15. We have all met or bumped into at least one spy in our lifetime. Whether it be CIA, foreign intelligence, a private company, etc. The job requires them to perfectly blend in with their environment. If they're halfway decent, you would never know who they really are. There is no way to definitively disprove the claim that someone you've known isn't who they appeared to be. I don't mean that in a paranoid kind of way though. The Lord knows the Red Scare did a lot of damage. It's just an idea that I find super interesting. With the amount of people we meet in our lifetime, it's definitely possible. Especially with the older generations who lived through the Cold War. 16. Small-scale conspiracy theory here. My wife and I are staying at a beach resort that provides complimentary boogie boards. The caveat is that you can only rent them when water conditions are clear, aka the red danger flags are not up. Both this year and last year, the flags were up the entire time during our stay, regardless of ocean conditions. What's interesting, though, is that there are no lifeguards, and the resort doesn't prevent people from going into the water, and plenty of people have boogie boards. Where did they get them? They had to buy them at the resort store. My wife is fully convinced that the red flags are a coordinated scheme to sell boogie boards to vacationers and then collect them for free when people have to fly home. 17. When Michael J. Fox dies, he will be the final victim of serial killer Robert Pickton. Pickton was a pig farmer in Canada, who fed his victims to his pigs to cover up his crimes. Here's the thing. There are some diseases, notably prion diseases, which are notoriously difficult to kill. A pig can eat someone with a prion disease and that same pig can be butchered and processed and cooked and the prion will survive. Once you eat the tainted meat, the death clock countdown starts. Prion will multiply in your system. There is no vaccine or cure or treatment. Parkinson's has many symptoms in common with a prion disease. It's a progressively degenerative neural disease. There are some genetic components, but some cases appear out of nowhere. Fox's breakout role was Leo and Me, a short-run Canadian TV show. This show is noteworthy because 4 other people on the set have developed Parkinson's, against all known odds. Leo and Me filmed just when Pickton's serial killing was getting started. It cannot be proven, but it is within the realm of possibility that Pickton's tainted pork ended up on the craft services table for Leo and Me and gave the people who ate the sausage rolls or ham and cheese sandwiches prion disease. 18. That your phone's microphone is constantly hot and it's listening for keywords to target advertising. Most glaring instance where this happened to me was when I walked into a colleague's office. He had just gotten a standing desk, but one that goes on top of his existing desk rather than a standalone, pun? Model. That's important to note. I said, "Nice standing desk, when did you get that?" "Thanks, just today." He replied. That was literally all that was said about the desk. We talked about work-related stuff and as I walked out and checked my phone, there was an ad on Facebook for that exact model of standing desk. I have never owned one, wanted one, or Googled one before. Yet there it was on my feet. 19. Big sock. When I was a kid, we had like 2 or 3 kinds of socks total. White calf, white crew, and black dress. The rich people also had Argyle but no one else could afford them. Then the secret conglomerates started going crazy. Gray, blue, funky prints. It initially started with those stupid rainbow toe socks and launched from there. And sock sales skyrocketed. Then came the really sneaky part. They convinced people that you don't have to match socks. And their sales really went up. What, man? All we needed was like 4 or maybe 5 types of max. Now these super rich are flying helicopters and vacationing in Greece or wherever on that sweet, sweet sock money. Wake up people. 20. That the CIA was heavily involved in the spread and success of modern art as a means to easily create value and move money. Before we had to wait before some dead experts get rediscovered and that their paintings become valuable, but with modern art it was possible to manufacture success. They could use PR, grease a few critics and all of a sudden they created value. That was perfect to launder money or to avoid controls and checks. 21. Not even sure if there is a theory about this, but let me throw this one. Deleting Facebook, Instagram, Google, whatever account doesn't really delete anything. While your public or publicized information is no longer available to you or others. However, it is still available to Facebook and their partners. After that, no added information is available to you. Old information can be used in whatever way desired. As we know, humans tend to follow patterns, so it would be relatively easy to target you via other methods. The same exists for Google. Just because they say they delete your information, it doesn't really mean that they do, you just can't find it. 22. In less than 10 years the internet will no longer exist. Someone will create, intentionally or accidentally, an AI so malicious that anything hooked up to internet will not work correctly. New, separate internet connections will be created, but they will fail in an increasingly shorter amount of time. It will reach a point that even a clean internet will be so populated by AIs that human interaction through the medium will cease. It's a dead internet theory. 23. That the entire pro-life movement is to ensure that there is always a poor working class. The majority of people who need an abortion are the people who cannot afford to have a kid and have limited means to go somewhere where they can have it done. It limits their upward financial mobility while oftentimes limiting their children's prospects as well. Across the globe there is a population decline, and a lot of countries are worried about it. It's plausible the entire push about pro-life has little to do with religion or ideals, and more a push to ensure we always have cheap labor. 24. Kawaii culture is Japan's way of covering up the war crimes of the Empire of Japan. I don't believe that this was orchestrated by the government, however it would make sense for veterans to want to distract themselves with cute images. The Japanese government has also denied its war crimes such as the Nanjing massacre, further validating this theory. 25. That all of those souvenir shops on prominent shopping streets in London, England are money laundering fronts. You know, the ones with a massive floor space selling key rings and knockoff hoodies that say TikTok or something yet have no customers except young male staff sat about on their phones? How on earth would a not terribly busy shop survive in Europe's most expensive retail space other than that? Also factoring in a global pandemic and a massive reduction in international tourists, who they're presumably aimed at, yet they show no signs of shutting down. They also all appear to be owned by the same person and stock the same merchandise. 26. The dead internet theory. Basically, an insanely substantial number of people you interact with online are bots, either pushing a desired narrative and controlling the public opinion on volatile political topics or simply marketing products and entertainment media. Reddit is especially bad. The upvote-downvote system combined with persistent AI bombarding makes it easy to push one opinion and hide dissenters away from sight, and that builds an entire self-reinforcing fake reality once the actual human posters start to fall in line and upvote the approved narrative for their sweet dopamine hits. Anything related to politics or movies/TV or other viral topics is the furthest thing from genuine or real on this site. I've personally witnessed this on several different sites, and it's always freaky to see when the bots go haywire. The last time I remember was when that one Reddit thread about Coca-Cola or something that was filled with bots all repeating the exact same script. It got so bad that the majority of the posts in that thread were purged and the thread was eventually deleted. 27. JFK Jr. plane crash was no accident. He was by all accounts a good pilot and was extremely near the completion of his instrument rating. No way he would have been confused by slightly low, but still widely reported as decent visibility that night. He always filed flight plans but didn't that night. He almost always flew with an instructor and didn't that night. Incredibly slow rescue effort. Inconsistencies with Coast Guard reports. Political figures die in aviation accidents more frequently even after adjusting for the large amount of time they spend in the air. Whenever a politician dies in a plane crash, eyebrows should be raised. 28. I saw a link to Kyle Odom's manifesto on here. It starts with his background, being a former Marine and then studying biochemistry at the University of Idaho. He went on to say that one night during deep meditation he had come into contact with an alien species in what he described as a black void. He said from that moment on the aliens would constantly mess with him in his head. He went into great detail about his torment. He then actually tried to get help and checked himself into a mental institution. He ended up getting cleared and sent home, but this didn't stop him. He eventually found himself receiving text messages from a weird phone number to come to this church. When he arrived, he said the entire church was full of these alien beings. He decided to type up this manifesto and put an end to it by assassinating the pastor of the church. He ended up firing an entire magazine of hollow point bullets into the back of this pastor from direct range. He then boarded a plane to the White House and is arrested throwing his manifesto over the White House fence because he believed Barack Obama and many other world leaders were going through the same thing as him. Where it gets even stranger is that the pastor made a miraculous full recovery and came out perfectly fine. The entire time I was reading it I truly felt bad for this veteran clearly going through psychosis, but the ending really made believe he wasn't crazy. How does a trained Marine fire an entire magazine of hollow point bullets at direct range into the back of a human being and they make a full recovery in a couple of days? These people are literally trained to kill. 29. I'm convinced that the Obama administration was behind the Panama Papers leaks. For those who don't remember, the Panama Papers were a huge trove of documents that were leaked to the media in 2016 from a law firm that helped the ultra-rich create shell companies to hide their wealth from taxes. The documents exposed an enormous amount of corruption everywhere, but was particularly damning in its revelations about authoritarian governments and Russia in even more particular. The leaker was completely anonymous to the point where the journalists who reported on the story do not know their identity. I fully believe that the mystery leaker was actually the U.S. intelligence community, and the decision to do it was made at the elevated levels of the Obama administration. The leak was huge and complex, and it mainly exposed U.S. adversaries while at the same time not really affecting many Americans because in the U.S. egregious tax avoidance is completely legal. It happened in early 2016 at a time that would have been the Obama administration's foreign policy team's final window to do something before the elections in the fall and the transfer of power. On top of that, the idea of a global war on corruption has been a hobby horse of many of Obama's top foreign policy advisors since leaving office. It also somehow just feels like the kind of idealistic thing they would have done. Like the belief that the truth will out and all you need to do is shine a light and things will improve is very 08 hope and change Obama. The Panama Papers feels like the kind of thing you do on your way out the door to recapture the idealism that you had to compromise on over the previous 8 years. Why does this matter? Who cares if it was U.S. intelligence and not a whistleblower behind a well-meaning but ultimately disappointing disclosure about the crimes of the global rich? Well, in the days immediately following the start of the Panama Papers reporting in April of 2016, a different and arguably more influential hack and leak operation began, Russian intelligence's fancy bear hack of the DNC servers. If the U.S. was responsible for a hack that deeply embarrassed Putin and disrupted his finances, it definitely shades your understanding of his decision to disrupt the U.S. election to hurt Obama's chosen successor by releasing embarrassing information. 30. Flat Earth, reptilian overlords, and other far-out and stupid conspiracy theories were started by the government. This causes the basic idea of conspiracy theory to be dismissed as stupid and the work of idiots. That way any actual correct conspiracy theories are simply dismissed at first by the general public, and if they actually do start to be believed, the government has had plenty of warning to destroy files or move personnel. Also, handbag manufacturers pay clothing designers not to put pockets on women's clothing. This way handbags can't go out of general style, like wigs did, as they are a required purchase for a woman to successfully exist in society. 31. On September 30th in 1965 there was an attempted coup in Jakarta in which a few army generals were murdered and thrown down a well. The Indonesian Communist Party was blamed by the man who became president after a coup in 1967, Suharto, and it triggered widespread anti-communist and anti-Chinese sentiment. Tens of thousands to perhaps 1 million people were killed. There's never been an official, public investigation. Some think the president at the time, Sukarno, might have done it. Some say it was an internal military issue that got out of hand. Some think that Suharto, who became president later for 4 decades, was part of it. I fully believe Suharto and co. were responsible. 32. The polls are hiding something. I mainly believe this because I think it's a fun one to believe with no negative consequences. My main reason is that the poles have some of the harshest environments in existence on Earth. Anyone exploring will either write them off as nothing there or end up dead. On top of this, Antarctica has a massive army of ground soldiers patrolling in constant formation. We refer to them as penguins. We don't understand their purposes other than their march. All they do is march. What are they guarding? They have scouts even checking for ships on approach in southern parts of other countries. Their ranks and unit are shown through their unique patterns, colors, and whiskers. The North Pole meanwhile is on the defense. They have deployed some of the deadliest creatures. The polar bear and narwhal. All I'm saying is something is being protected. 33. Personally, I believe that corporations 100% understand internet culture and pretend to be incompetent at it to appear cute, or to have more people spread its name around as, oh, look at how outdated/stupid this company is, all while spreading its name around. A little bit of me dies when I see a brand, S-roasts or brand Twitter fails number 38. My proof is the meme, brand, sent a while ago with the Soy Week being excited for their, brand, meal. Even just looking at it would be enough to tell anyone that this person is meant to be a sarcastic character. There are literally zero ways in which anyone could ever have misconstrued that as a normal person. However, it still came out positively for them, since the horde of members came and posted tweets making fun of it, thus indirectly promoting the brand. This feels exactly like the kind of 4D chess that I know a PR team would come up with. I don't even know if this is a conspiracy theory or if it's just an established fact, but it's a theory I will die on a hill for. Just finished writing this, I'm replacing all brand names with brand, because I'm not going to promote anyone without payment. 34. My friend has a theory that all the major soda companies are going to slowly over time change the recipe of their normal with sugar varieties to be the same recipe as the sugar-free ones. Then one day they'll launch, for example, Coca-Cola Premium, now with real sugar at a higher price than what it used to be. I am convinced this will happen. The companies would make so much more money off of the sugar variants than they do now because of sugar taxes, and they would still make the same amount of money on the ones that are sugar-free or diet or whatever. They could literally just put different sweeteners in the various kinds of Coke, and they would technically be allowed to sell assorted products. All that's happening is that they're upping the price of normal Coke and disguising it as a new product. 35. That another housing crash is inevitable and that, this time, it is going to propel us into an age of neo-feudalism. People are going to lose their houses, the elite will scoop up a huge amount of real estate, and then rent it all back to us. If you are under 40, it is going to be unlikely that you will ever own property. With a death grip on housing, our new feudal lords will be able to price out anyone they don't want living in their affluent areas. Instead of bidding wars on real estate, we will be subjected to bidding against each other for rent prices. Don't have enough? Sucks to suck. The poor and disenfranchised will be chased out of cities and any hopes of ever owning their own home will become a dream of the past. Airbnb has shown landowners that they can milk more money out of people than stable renters. Large cities that rely on tourism have been pricing out locals for years. We already see foreign investors buy up property in countries like France, Greece, Italy, Germany, and the list goes on. This age of neo-feudalism will destroy local schools, churches, businesses, etc., as locals will be forced to relocate. Young people growing up will be forced to move out further from the places they once called home to find more affordable places. Boomers are now entering their last years, meaning that a ton of real estate will become available to these investors. Unless you can inherit a home from your parents, consider yourself screwed. With wages not increasing with inflation, massive amounts of school debt, overpriced healthcare, and increasing rent, millennials and Generation Z will be subjected to a lifetime of debt that will be almost impossible to pay off. Have you ever seen photos of countries where the rich and poor are separated by walls? Don't think that isn't a potential for our nation. Is there anything we can do about it? Probably not. We live in a plutocracy where the wealthy and influential buy out our politicians to make sure we all stay poor. 36. That fungus is a fully sentient being that was seeded here from somewhere else, either a dying planet or who knows why. Fungus interaction with the earth created the terraforming necessary to bring about human life. spiders came with them. To protect fungus by limiting the bug populations. If you study arachnids and fungus, they are not like anything else on the planet. Most everything has a pattern that matches. We see evidence in everything around us, from the roots to the trees, to our nerve system, to the amoeba in the ocean. Everything has a matching pattern. Except mushrooms and spiders. Those murs are from somewhere else. 37. I remember right after September 11th, I watched Donald Rumsfeld on the Charlie Rose Show. He said that fighter jets were sent up to escort the hijacked plane headed to the Pentagon, to an open field to do the least amount of damage when it was taken down. I watched Charlie Rose's face, incredulous and in shock that Rumsfeld would admit something like that on TV. He even repeated it to him, something like, "Are you saying the American government took the plane down?" And Rumsfeld dodged without disagreeing in a "we did what had to be done" kind of way. Then, suddenly the clip was gone. I couldn't find it anywhere, pre-social media, remember. Suddenly this amazing Hollywood-like story came out about the passengers attacking the hijackers and all being heroes before dying. All on the black box, they said. Whenever news about that flight was, or is, on TV, all you saw was pictures of people walking around an empty field in Pennsylvania. Not a single piece of wreckage because it was blown to smithereens. But no one remembers that now. The Hollywood story is a better memory for the country. 38. Pop music industry is about anything but the music itself. It serves political interests of the ruling class, economic interests of the financial elites which go beyond the sales of the music itself, because it is likely used to manipulate young people and fry people's brains in general, and it is probably also integrates some sort of tax evasion/money laundering scheme, depending on which politicians in conjunction with multinationals and their lobbyists are currently pulling the strings. Also, I believe a lot of the song lyrics are not purely written by artists, but based on thorough gathering of keywords through language analysis tools and machine learning algos from social media sites, Google search data, etc. 39. Stuart McKenzie. Well, it's a well-known fact, Sonny Jim, that there's a secret society of the 5 wealthiest people in the world, known as the Penta-Irate, who run everything in the world, including the newspapers, and meet triannually at a secret country mansion in Colorado, known as the Meadows. Tony Giardino. So, who's in this Penta-Irate? Stuart McKenzie, the Queen, the Vatican, the Gettys, the Rothschilds, and Colonel Sanders before he went test up. Oh, I hated the Colonel with his wee beady eyes. And that smug look on his face. "Oh, you're going to buy my chicken." Oh. Charlie McKenzie. Dad, how can you hate the Colonel? Stuart McKenzie, because he puts an addictive chemical in his chicken that makes you crave it fortnightly. 40. George H.W. Bush was involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion and assassination of JFK. I'll list just a few anecdotes that provide evidence. H.W. has ties to the Bay of Pigs invasion. Zapata Petroleum, which George H.W. Bush was president of, which was more or less a CIA purchasing front. Zapata's SEC filings from 1960 to 1966 were allegedly destroyed by mistake. Zapata allowed its rigs to be used as listening posts. -2 landing craft in the Bay of Pigs invasion were named Houston and Barbara. Remind you of anyone? HW is claimed to have no memory of where he was when JFK was assassinated. He was, in fact, in Dallas on that day. On November 29, 1963, a memo from the FBI stated that the agency had briefed a Mr. George Bush of the CIA on the reaction of Cuban exiles in Miami to the JFK assassination, bringing it back to the Bay of Pigs. 41. This one I'm sure of. I use weed killer to keep the edges of my lawn in check as I don't have a whippersnipper. You Yanks will know this as a weed whacker, I guess. Anyway, it allows me to grab all the lawn with just the lawn mower while retaining really neat looking edges. I do the edges of the driveway, where the lawn meets the curb and guttering, where the lawn meets the footpath, etc., etc. Now if I leave it too long, I get all sorts of exotic weeds that didn't exist on my lawn before I started doing this pop up just where I use the poison. I'm convinced they put slow-release weed seeds in the poison. I mean, it's the perfect product. You have to keep buying it or your weeds will be worse than ever, ha. And before people start suggesting birds spread the weeds, or wind etc. These new weeds pop up only where I spray. I tell people about this half-jokingly, but I believe it's completely feasible. I guess if they made poison that just killed the ground so well in that area, you would only need to buy it once. 42. That world leaders in the first world are in bed with corporations and enabling them to flourish during the pandemic and intentionally shutting down any competition for them, making lockdowns as ineffective as possible to ensure they run longer, etc. In order to strip rights from citizens to ensure citizens are less of a threat, stir up controversy and racial tensions around the world to keep us occupied on something else, and further the class divide. This is just after the 2008 recession where in America, the sudden uptick of racial tensions began, and through monitoring and analyzing media publications for years after, mega media sources repeatedly posted about likely non-existent or exceedingly small issues to exacerbate the problem to draw less attention to the furthering the class divide. Politicians have been bought off forever. They're just required to circumvent rights outlined in constitutions. Corporations, despite what people think, are not all-powerful. They need politicians to be all-powerful, and the recession is part of what got them fully in bed with each other, because banking moguls convinced too many politicians to lose too much money on bogus investments and politicians got greedy and wanted reparations. 43. U.S. Border Patrol is the biggest human trafficking operation in the world, and the CIA/FBI are some of the biggest cocaine traders. The why is in just about every conspiracy that turned out to be true is just money. The fact of the matter is that the CIA Contra Coke debacle is just the one that hit the light of day. I highly doubt that the U.S. intelligence agencies above using drugs to destabilize a country for influence or money or both. As for Border Patrol, well, Epstein and Trump were good friends, and with Trump's little concentration camps not bothering to keep records of the kids they put in cages. Mix a rich and powerful pedophile trader with a bunch of unwanted and unregistered children and it writes itself. With Epstein's suicide, this network could remain operational without him, and since there haven't been any big public developments about it, I expect it's been successfully squelched and is operating simply fine. 44. There's still some horrible stuff going down in Hollywood, obviously, but not just Hollywood but in celebrity-dom anywhere, authors, musicians etc. The Pizzagate/regeneration by blood of children conspiracy or whatever that was supposed to be, is just a cover to make people who are questioning if certain rich people are pesos, look like mental cases. There's some truth behind the lies. And I think it's dated back years and is still going strong, unfortunately. Yes, I believe there's some celebs who tried to bring the truth to light and they have been conveniently bumped off over the years. It was a shock when ________ committed suicide. They never showed any signs, not to make dismissive those who actually committed suicide of course, but I'm referring to some who clearly wouldn't have done so. No, because the Pizzagate part is a lie, to throw you off. One could wonder, is insert a kind nice celeb on peso? The truth is potentially, and names would probably shock you, but the conspiracy is now you seem like weirdo, so stop believing in that. 45. That our phone microphones are constantly on and constantly recording. Then that information is used to put ads on our social media/other websites based on conversations we have with other people. Example, my kids and I went to a friend's house. They played with our friend's kids and showed me these popper fidget toy things. I have never seen them before in my life. I had a brief conversation with the kid's mom about them, and then today, 2 days later, I have ads for them all over my Facebook and they are suggested to me on Amazon. I never looked them up, never seen or used one, but there they are. This has happened several times with things I have spoken to my husband about and suddenly saw ads, videos, posts, and buying suggestions related to it.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.